So then Skinny Man showed up with documents for Vince. It was a summons. Coach signed it like a dipshit.
That's a good way to get fired.
And then he read it and had to go find Vince. Umaga versus Cena. Basically, it was an average.
It was 3.5 minutes.
It was an average match, and then in ran Orton and Carlito. They were beating up Cena, and they told Umaga to give him the ass spot in the corner, and Umaga decided to turn on them. He beat them up, and he threw them outside. And
there's a moment where he had Carlito down in one corner,
yeah,
Cena down in the other, and he was looking back and forth like, who should I hit with my ass? And finally he decided Carlito was going to be the victim, and everyone cheered. And
that's going to be an awesome drop.
And Umaga charged, and Carlito ran away.
Yeah. Umaga's apparently going to be a babyface. I actually frown on this idea. I don't like the idea of Umaga being a babyface, because who wants to see Umaga sell?
No one.
And how do you make Umaga sell for prolonged periods of time? He needs to be a heel. And maybe he will be a heel next week, because they signed Orton and Carlito versus Cena and Umaga. And hopefully Umaga turns on Cena.
It could be the long-awaited Horseman beatdown.
Sure, but that makes no sense, really.
Unless
we want to set up 3 number 1 contenders, and I don't know.
I don't know.
But anyway, that's the main event for next week. And then Vince was about to leave. And he walked past everybody, including Paul London, who was smiling again. This was exactly the same as the first time, except they shot it. They just had the camera on the other side of him. And he went outside, and there was 2 dudes sitting on a production box. And then there was his limo. And he opened the door, looked around, got in, and was about to shut the door when Coach ran out screaming and said, no, don't. You must read this. And he said a summons had arrived that he had signed for. And Vince said, well, you probably already read it, so why don't you tell me what it said? And Coach said, well, you're being served with a paternity suit for an illegitimate child that you have sired. He said, I hope that was in the
I was going to say, did he actually say that?
He said, apparently there was another member of the McMahon family running around somewhere.
That part he did say.
Yes.
Running around somewhere.
And that's where the show ended. And the big question is, who is Vince McMahon's illegitimate child? Well, I don't know. But
God, you're a dick.
But I do know what the plan was before Chris Benoit died. I actually have the entire storyline that they had prior to Benoit's death, where they were going to go after the limo blew up. And the entire thing is going to be in the newsletter. I'm going to make you assholes read it. But I did promise to say who the illegitimate child was going to be. I will say this. If they pick up the storyline where they left off, which it appears they're doing, the illegitimate child is going to be Mr. Kennedy.
Yeah, I had heard that.
Mr. Kennedy is going to be the illegitimate child. And there's actually a big, complicated storyline that involves a number of things, including Hunter being outed as Vince McMahon's son-in-law.
Oh, what a dramatic turn that would be.
And thus leading to a feud. An illegitimate son and Triple H.
Yes.
And the son-in-law. So I don't know if that's where they're going.
As long as Hunter buries him, I'm fine with that.
Yes, but that's where they were going. And it was actually a very complicated, wacky storyline, which was actually really great. I don't know if it would have meant a goddamn thing or would have been huge business, but if this would have happened in like during the boom period, it probably would have been absolutely gigantic.
And remembered forever.
Oh, yeah. I have no idea if in 2007, with wrestling the way it is right now, and 2.51 ratings or whatever the final number is going to be, I don't know if it's going to be that huge, but we shall see. We shall see where they go with it. But that was the plan, and I presume that's still the plan. But I'm going to put the entire storyline in the newsletter tomorrow, so you'll all have to read it. All right. Enough of the hijinks.
No more tomfoolery.
So the show opened with Vince coming out. All the WWE stars were surrounding the ring. Fit Finlay, 48. Flair, number of other guys. Vince said he was shocked that he had an illegitimate child. He said he would admit to a rendezvous or two, but he didn't remember this woman. He said she was withholding the name of the child from him. This was far from a paternity suit. It was extortion. He would not be extorted by this lousy woman who should have been on the pill. So anyway, ended up with Stephanie coming out, and it was appalling. So she ranted and raved, and I haven't figured out how this works yet. Maybe there's part of the storyline I'm missing, but somehow she was able to find out who the child was, and the father couldn't. She just went to the lawyer and said, "Tell me I'm the daughter."
I'm not sure she knows. I think they just told her it's a wrestler.
Oh.
Which makes even less sense.
Well,
this is not logical. Don't try to think about it too much.
It's still great. You can get away with not having any logic if it's great. And that's the problem with TNA. There's no logic, and it sucks.
Yes.
At least there's no logic in WWE, and Vince McMahon's funny.
He is crazy Vince. So,
she said that, yes, it is someone standing around the ring right now. And when she said this, the fucking place went crazy. They were into it. Oh my God, one of these wrestlers is Vince's child. And they all chanted Kennedy, of course. And she said this child was a WWE superstar. Everyone was looking at each other, including Shag and JTG.
Yes, that's what hit me. It's Shad. Shad Gaspard is Vince McMahon's son.
Flair was laughing. Vince looked at everybody, walked around the ring. Then he left, and as he was going up the aisle, he had a face-off with Kennedy, which was awesome. Then he had another one with Mark Henry, which was far more awesome.
You couldn't hear Henry, unfortunately, but you knew he was saying, "You stupid fool, you are not my father."
Yeah, and then he left, and this was great. They are doing this perfectly.
It is a slow build.
It is a mystery.
Each week the storyline progresses, but it doesn't, end. There's still more to come.
It was an announcement that the people cared about.
Yes.
Amazingly.
This crowd was awesome tonight, by the way.
This was the best crowd I've ever seen, I think.
It's MSG, that helps, but...
Yeah. Well, they've had bad shows in MSG, bad crowds. This was a great crowd, and they were into everything that happened, so that's good stuff. Then we had Vince going nuts with Coach. He said it was one thing to have an illegitimate child. It was something else for your daughter to tell you was someone on the roster. Boy, I'll say. So then Coach said, well, let's try and figure this out. We'll go through the ages of all the talent. At what age did you become sexually active? Let's say 20. Vince was appalled. So Coach kept lowering the number, and Vince finally admitted he was almost a teenager. Coach had no idea how this was even possible, which is a pretty good question, actually. And who should show up behind Vince McMahon but Ric Flair, with the biggest smile you've ever seen.
Ric Flair's never been so happy.
Cackling. The key was, Coach said, it could be anybody. And Ric Flair is 53, and Vince McMahon is 62. He would have been 9.
Okay, it's not him.
Probably not Ric Flair. But that would be the greatest storyline in wrestling history.
Ric Flair is Vince McMahon's son?
Yes. Boy, where they could go with that one.
Flair was just giddy with joy at the thought of either being Vince's son or just knowing the hell that Vince was going through. And then he just started to go woo repeatedly.
Yeah.
And it was awesome because he's Ric Flair and it was Vince McMahon.
Vince was meeting with the coach. So he didn't want to brag, but he wanted to fuck somebody in every state. He remembered that one time on Mount Rushmore and the iceberg in Alaska. Many, many times, he said. So Coach said, why don't you give me a list of all of your indiscretions, and I will cross-reference them, and I will have an answer by Saturday night's main event.
Coach is a hell of a lackey.
He is a great
lackey.
He's
always working to make Vince happy.
You need to take notes.
I'll see what I can do.
Because you are a poor lackey most of the time. I can't say all the time, just most of the time. So Cody Rhodes walked up and gave Vince a condom and then ran off like a wacky teen hooligan. And Vince said, remind me to sue that company, Trojan. It's the Magnum division.
Yes.
And then Boogeyman showed up and sang Cats in the Cradle.
Yes. And again, Boogeyman could be Vince's son.
Coach said he has your eyes.
This segment ruled.
I love this show way more than I probably should have. It was awesome.
The Magnum line was so perfect.
And then we had a coach meeting with Vince. And Coach wanted to know if this were all of his indiscretions. Vince said, yes, from the 70s. He said this whole thing was fine because it allowed him to relive some great memories, like that time he was flying over China. And suddenly Coach said, look behind you, Vince. And behind him was Linda, who said, Vince, as of right now, you no longer have a home. And she left. So now Vince is being investigated by Congress, investigated by Congress. IRS is auditing him, a paternity suit, and he's been kicked out of the house.
I have two things to say. One, this was by leaps and bounds the best performance of Linda McMahon's career. This may have been her first good performance ever. It was fine. She delivered her one line in a fine manner, and then she left, and it was great. Two, now that Vince is homeless, we need Vince McMahon and Coach roommates. Those would be awesome sketches.
Those actually, I must agree.
That would be a fine idea.
That would be awesome. So that was Raw, everybody. 2 thumbs up. Get a copy of that one if you can. A fine program. Fun stuff. Then we had Vince and Coach meeting with Teddy, Crystal, and Vicky. Great Khali walked in, ranting and raving in Great Khali's. He basically said that he was very angry about having to face Kane tonight and didn't want to. Teddy told him, well, too bad, the match is on. And suddenly Coach tapped Vince and said, remember that time in India? And Vince's eyes got wide, and he looked Khali up and down, and he inspected his gargantuan package, and he was in heaven that perhaps this gigantic, humongously endowed man was, in fact, his child.
And Khali was smiling back at him, saying with a smile, yes, I could be the fruit of your loins.
I could be the product of your semen.
Yes.
This was great.
And Vince wished him luck, and Khali said yes. And they shook hands. This was like a great segment, yes.
This was awesome. So Vince was still excited about the possibility of siring the Great Khali. Said he was sure this man was going to retain at SummerSlam. And anyway, Coach said, listen, you're a great physique. Dave's great physique. He could be your son. And they said, well, anyone could be your son. Vince was very happy about the idea of Batista as his son. And anyway, Fat Oily Guy showed up, also as a potential candidate. And this was so horrible until Vince was just so appalled that he turned his back on the fat guy. And then Coach began dancing with the fat guy, and that made this great.
Coach could not resist. He saw the fat guy having fun and said, hey, I want to have fun too. And Coach and the fat guy danced for a while until Vince turned around and spotted him, and Coach was caught, and he was humbled, and they left, and the fat guy danced after them, and it was awesome.
All right, enough bullshit. I just saw one I want to play, but I'm not going to. All right, Saturday night's main event. I have to try and make this show at least somewhat interesting because the rest of this sucked. Saturday night's main event opened up with Vince talking about his child and everything like that, and Coach said he'd done all the cross-referencing tonight. They were going to find out who the child was. Vince couldn't wait. Coach said, are you sure you've told me everything? Vince said, well, there was one more thing, this rendezvous with a black truck driver in Kansas City in the 70s, and Coach said, wait, I'm black, and I was born in the 70s, and I was born in Kansas City, and I'm adopted. And this was a potential child that Vince was not happy with. He was appalled, and he said it was going to be a long night.
The acting here was so bad. So horrible. Mostly Vince, but Coach too. This is a bad segment to open Saturday night's main event.
I thought it was so bad it was good. Vince and Coach cannot be bad.
I will accept that argument, but it was certainly not good acting.
Then we had Vince wanting to know who the child was, and Coach told him, calm down. They'd reveal it after a while. So as they're heading off, Vince happened to walk by a mirror, and he looked into it, and it morphed into a reflection of him in, 1988 with his baby blue suit and his pompadour and his big smile and his microphone, and then it went away.
Right.
And then Farouk walked up, saw his own reflection, was smitten, said, damn, and that was the end of the segment.
In hindsight, this is even more perplexing to me. I imagined that it would go somewhere. I thought by the end of the show there would be more tales of Vince seeing his younger self in the mirror.
No.
I don't know.
Let me tell you what it is.
Okay.
Actually, I'll explain it as we get farther into the show here, because it all makes sense. MVP met with Evander Holyfield. Yes, Evander Holyfield. He was there. The fans acted like they could not believe this man was on this show, which I'm very understandable. So MVP said he was supposed to fight Matt, but he couldn't, so thank God Evander was here to take his place. Evander was apparently down with this, but I do not know because he did not say a single word on this entire show. Not a single syllable. So Coach came out to the doctors and stated that it would take some time to get the DNA results back, and so thankfully he had done some research and he was going to reveal who he believed was the child tonight through research. Started talking about how Vince was a handsome and virile man and did a lot of traveling and fucking and such, and Vince told him to please just get moving. So Coach said, well, there was a tryst around Louisville in the early 80s. I firmly believe this man could be your child. And so out came Eugene. So Vince said, listen, I did have sex with someone in Kentucky, but it was a woman, not my cousin.
She said it was a stranger, not my cousin.
A stranger, not my cousin. Vince said, this man could not be my son. So Eugene tried to explain something about his Uncle Eric. It told him that Vince had...
They actually did make an attempt to tie this into Eugene's character's continuity.
Yes.
Because the continuity editor showed up this week and will now disappear again for the next 4 years.
What did he say?
He said that Eric was pissed that Vince had impregnated his sister, and thus Eric Bischoff got into wrestling to take Vince McMahon down and get revenge. That was Eugene's theory.
Poor theory.
It was proven false when Vince kicked him out.
So then Coach said, well, there's another one. There was an after party in L.A. after WrestleMania 2. This person could be your long-lost daughter. And out came Melina. She did not look happy. Vince said, listen, this cannot be my daughter. Coach said, no, I'm pretty sure. And Vince said, no, it really can't. Let me tell you why. And he whispered something in Coach's ear, and Coach was like, holy Christ, that's disgusting. And Vince told Melina that this meeting with her on the 4th of July was surely harmless, and she grabbed the mic and said, it better be, because if I'm your daughter, I will take every cent you've got. And she stormed off, and Vince called her an ungrateful bitch. So anyway, Vince apparently fucked Melina. That's the story here.
Revelation 1.
Yeah. So then Coach said, well, there's one more guy, but after all this, probably not a good idea to introduce him. And Vince said, all right. But then as he's eating, he said, well, if there's just one more, why not? Give it to me. Ended up being Steve Austin, who came out, celebrated, drank his beers, did his routine, kicked Vince in the nuts, gave Coach a stunner. Then he took a beer and put it on Vince's nuts to make them feel better. And then he gave him a stunner after offering to drink beer with Vince. And it is true, Vince and Austin never gets old. And part of the comedy is Vince falls for it every time.
This was every Vince Austin segment you've ever seen. If you missed the show, you pop in any Vince Austin segment since 1997, it will be the same thing. And again, yes, it's like Charlie Brown in the football.
It is.
Vince always believes Austin really wants to be his friend this time.
Yep.
And then Austin kicks him in the gut and gives him a stunner.
They will be doing this act when Vince is 90 and Steve Austin is 80, and it'll probably be even funnier at that point, because that's how comedy works. If Vince Russo were in charge, at some point Vince would give Austin the stunner, which would not be funny. But I'm sure he would think it would, because it's a swerve. But sometimes things just need to be what everybody wants them to be. And that's exactly what this was.
That is what I noted. The crowd... we talked before about how everyone knew Karen Angle was going to turn on Joe. Somehow this crowd in MSG did not know Steve Austin was going to turn on Vince. Even though it was what they wanted to see, when it happened, it was like they were still pleasantly surprised. It's the same shtick. It still works.
Yes. The rest of this segment sucked, but this was great.
The most disturbing thing was, I read the spoilers. I heard about the Melina thing. I thought, okay, they tried to make a lame joke. No. This is not played for laughs.
Maybe it was, and it failed.
If it was played for laughs, it was the worst comedy ever. But yes, I got the impression that they want us to believe that Vince may have fucked his daughter.
Well, duh.
That's not funny, though.
Hello? They were going to do the angle where Steph was pregnant and Vince was the dad.
Weird people.
Vince came out instead of Cena and said, listen, your match is important and all, but what is important to me is his paternity suit. Apparently he has a paternity suit has been filed, but they're not giving him any information.
His lawyer sucks.
They're slowly filling him in on the specifics of this paternity suit. And I'm trying to figure out... I shouldn't be thinking about this.
No.
But I do it for TNA, so I got to do it for WWE. Although TNA, it angers me. Because it I don't know. Something about TNA where... I think because nothing on the show makes sense, I get even more upset.
If one, yeah. if there's a line, not even an angle, but there's a line that doesn't make sense, or one point that doesn't make sense, you think, hey, that doesn't make sense. But then the rest of it does, so you just move on. With TNA, it's snowballs.
You know what I think it is? You know what I think it is? I think it's because Vince is so great.
That's part of it, too.
And Coach is so great. And it's so fun that I'm fine with certain things not making sense. Like, what would this person be suing for? The child is full grown.
I guess 18 years of unpaid child support.
They have surpassed the age of 18.
Yes.
Why did they wait till this child was 30-something?
Well, that is a great question.
There are many, many questions to be asked here.
If you were going to file a paternity suit against Vince McMahon, you would have done it in 1998.
Why did you not? Why 1998?
Whenever they made all the money.
That's this year.
Okay, then now.
But anyway, the why is information not being given to Vince McMahon?
Yes.
Why is he not being told who this child is?
But apparently they think if they tell him the identity of his son, they will somehow lose the paternity suit.
But I think part of it also is because the nonsense adds to the comedy of the whole situation.
Yes.
If he just had it would be a Vince Russo move if they revealed who the child was on day one.
Oh, absolutely.
That does not work, okay? Yeah. So you've got to, it's just like running the ropes. You've got to suspend some disbelief for this to be fun. So anyway, he basically said, if I didn't know your dad, Orton, I would be proud to call you my son. And he said whoever his offspring was, he hoped they weren't like his other two offspring, Shane and Steph. And
Stain.
He wanted his son like himself. And anyway, Cena arrived, came down to the ring, and said he hated Vince. He was glad he wasn't his son because he would have shamed to have Vince as his father. And Orton had bailed, by the way. And
that was when the segment got great. Cena came out. He was late showing up, but they put his entrance on the big screen. Everyone cheered, and then his music played. He came out on the ramp, and Cena and Orton just stared at each other. They were both pissed, and they were angry, like they were going to fight. And as soon as Cena took one step towards the ring, Orton very calmly slipped out of the ring, the back way, and over the railing to the crowd.
Yes.
Awesome.
So Orton was in the crowd, and Cena, who was none the worse for wear from that whole chair shot thing they showed us 84 times, basically said he was going to be there Sunday, he was going to retain the belt, and ended up making fun of Cena's mom. He said, if you weren't there, I'm going to strip you the title. And speaking of stripping, I could have done your mom. Those are his exact words.
I might have done your mom. It was great to hear Vince McMahon say this.
I could have done your mom. So Cena slapped him hard. Vince's selling was absolutely fantastic. He blew a gasket. He said tonight Cena was going to pay. Was he signing him to a match against Orton, Umaga, and 10 other heels? No. A singles match with Snitsky.
That was his revenge. Clearly he was enraged.
The fans were like, huh? Who the fuck cares? This did not get the reaction I think that they wanted.
No.
So yes, the undefeated Snitsky against Cena tonight. And this was not the atrocity we are going to talk about later. So Vince was upset about the slap, but also happy because it had been revealed, by the way, that his illegitimate child was a man and not a woman. He said, thank God, not another daughter. And then Coach said, what if Triple H happened to be your son? And they glanced at each other and then said, no, there's no chance of that. So they ran into various folks, Daivari, Val Venus, and finally Ken Kennedy, and that was the one that got the big pop. So everybody knows it's coming, and that's fine.
That's great, actually.
It will work when it occurs. So then we had Vince meeting with Melina backstage, and he was basically trying to get some tonight.
Pretty much, actually, yes. He assured her that he had a son, not a daughter, therefore it was okay if she went to his hotel room and wherever he was staying.
They could hump again.
They could, yeah.
So anyway, up walked Snitsky and said he never knew his parents or his family.
He may have actually cleared his throat, too.
All he ever knew about was causing pain. These characters on Raw show a complexity that rivals that of...
They're so real. They're
yeah.
So deep. so three-dimensional.
He said he was going to beat up Cena and make him feel pain. Cena's pain was his pleasure, Dad. This sucked.
This was every generic big mean heel pro wrestling promo from 1973 you ever heard.
So Vince and Coach showed up, my favorite duo in wrestling, and Vince said, you actually think my bastard son could be here on this brand? And Coach reminded him of an incident in a New York bathroom stall, and he said, this could be the product of that union. And in walked Balls Mahoney. And Vince was appalled, and the whole deal was to build up to the big spot of him screaming, I have no balls! And
even Balls Mahoney laughed at this line.
Yeah.
A guy whose name is based on balls jokes knew this was funny.
This actually had been done on Saturday Night's Main Event, and they had to edit it off, so we got take 2 here. And we need a clip of that. Speaking of Nancy Grace, that's the clip we need on that show. Vince screaming, I have no balls! As they talk about long-term steroid use and testicular failure on the next program.
It would work, actually. I hadn't thought of it that way.
Vince was very upset that Coach couldn't find his bastard child. And Coach said, well, I have one more potential bastard tonight. His middle name happens to be M, like McMahon. It was CM Punk. And Coach said, actually Vince said, listen, you're talented and all, young man, but you cannot be my son. After all, you're straight edge, no drink, no drugs, that sort of thing. And Punk said, well, there's one other thing that I don't do. I don't have dirty, unprotected sex with some money-grubbing skank who eventually files a paternity suit against me that gets me kicked out of my own house and leaves me nothing but a living, breathing national disgrace. And Vince actually cackled halfway through this speech before he got very, very angry. And then Punk stormed off, and this was great. This was great.
Yes, this was awesome. All 3 guys were perfect here. It was Vince being Vince, Coach being Coach, and Punk almost being ROH Punk, just taking a shot at the corporate billionaire owner. And my favorite part was was Punk did not back down from Vince at all. Punk fit in with the scene, and that's important. And then after he left, Vince was furious and irate, and he took a half step Punk's direction, and Coach just threw up his arm to block him with his stone face. And I can't explain why this was great, but it was. And Coach and Vince are awesome together, and I have no problem with them being on every show.
Vince was in mid-ring. They were trying to figure out his son. Coach said, well, what do we know about this man? He's tall. What do we know about Vince? He's tall, intelligent, loves making people's lives living hell, and he's white. So Vince took offense to the white part, I should know. So Kane came out. Vince said, there's no way this man is my son. Coach said, well, sir, he does appear to have your eye. And everybody cackled. And Kane said all those years Vince wasn't around. He wasn't there for him at all the birthdays, the Little League games.
Little League.
We need footage of Kane.
Oh, God, what I would pay to see Kane in Little League.
Playing Little League.
That would be awesome.
So, anyway, Kane said he didn't want money. He didn't want gifts. He just wanted one thing. Finlay. Why? I don't know. Maybe something happened last week. Who cares? So anyway, Vince said, you don't want my money? You can have Finlay at SummerSlam. So then out came Chris Masters, who said he had proof that Kane was not his son, but that Chris Masters was. It was a picture of Masters posing with Vince from 15 years ago. This was his proof.
And a Shawn Michaels shirt was the best part.
His proof wasn't like a videotape of the
Vince nailing his mom?
No, like, a videotape of the Kane, Undertaker, Paul Bearer storyline. That would eliminate that option. But no, that was his proof. And so, anyway, he challenged Kane to a Master Lock challenge. They brought in a chair. Kane said, no, you sit down. I'll put you in the hold. Masters refused, so Kane chokeslammed him. And then after everybody left, out came Chuck Palumbo.
This is all one segment.
Yeah, he had a match with Masters and squashed him. And Vince was impressed and strutted backstage, and that was that. Utterly pointless.
SmackDown needs to be 1 hour.
This illegitimate child storyline does not need to be on every single show because 3 times a week is too much. It's overkill. Raw is enough. When it's stuff like this that's just utter filler, it's pointless. It's useless. It hurts the whole package, the whole storyline to have something just. It's
being rammed down our throats.
No, it's not even that. I mean, if it were good on every show, that would be one thing, but it's impossible to do that. So you've got these stupid, what would it be like? I'm trying to think of an example. It would be like a title defense on every show.
Pointless. Meaningless.
it devalues the title. It hurts this storyline to be putting in such stupidity.
Sure.
And such pointless segments, and this was one of them. Then we had Vince and Coach meeting with Chuck Palumbo. They fawned all over him in his bikes. Vince said, "I have a bike." Palumbo said, "Wow, so did my dad." He did. He said his dad had two loves, bikes and Jack Daniels, and one day he mixed them and ended up in the grill of an 18-wheeler. And Vince and Coach said they were very sorry to hear that. And then Palumbo said, "So was my mother. She was at the wheel of the 18-wheeler." And then they left. Comedy.
I don't know what the hell seriously? This is supposed to be funny?
That's supposed to be funny.
I had no idea. I wrote down, what the hell? I have no idea what the point of this segment was.
We were supposed to laugh that his mom ran over his dad, and his dad ended up in the grill of an 18-wheeler and croaked.
Because he was driving drunk.
Yeah. Ha 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 ha!
Comedy has clearly passed me by.
Fuck, Vince. Jesus Christ. Vince Russo would be yelling at you. Get with the fucking times, dude. That's funny shit. Then we had Coach and Vince fucking around backstage. They had a cabana set up for all the GMs. Biggest party of the summer was on the wall. What a letdown this party was, by the way.
Vince walked in and noted, and basically it was all the GMs. Regal, Teddy Long, and Armando. And Coach was also there, and Vince walked in and said, "Wow, 4 guys partying by themselves. Hell of a party."
So Santino walked in and said that it was clear that Vincenzo McMahon was his father. Regal kicked him out. MVP was in next. He said he wanted to issue an open challenge to Matt Hardy for tonight. Said it would be worthy of SummerSlam. Vince said, "Okay, I'm looking forward to it." And everybody ended up leaving except Vince and Coach. And Vince looked around and saw the sign and palm trees. And then he looked at the Coach and said, "This room is gaudy." And that was the end.
That was the end.
I cannot be Vince McMahon. No. He is too great.
It was so great. At a random moment, Vince suddenly became very interested in interior decor.
Yes.
And he disapproved of this room.
Outraged.
This room was too over the top for Vince McMahon.
He could not handle it. And then we had the best segment all time, all my life. They were in the cabana. And in came Crime Time.
Yeah, so you had Crime Time, Coach, Vince, Teddy, and Regal.
So they said they might be Vince's son. Because after all, they like money.
Yeah.
Money, money, yeah, they began saying and dancing. And they were dancing in a circle around all the GMs. And you'll note that Crime Time is black.
Right.
As is Teddy Long and Coach and sort of Armando. He's not a white man. He's got rhythm.
Sure.
Unlike, say, Vince McMahon. So all of the minorities, I guess you could call them.
There you go, yes.
Begin dancing around behind Crime Time. Coach is jiving. Teddy Long is jiving. They're all having a grand old time.
I looked behind to see if Bernard was dancing. He was somehow remaining seated.
Yeah, and they're all dancing around in a big circle, and Vince and William Regal are standing there being danced around, and they're disgusted with this scene.
This buffoonery.
This happiness and these hijinks. So one of Crime Time grabs his hat, I think it was JTG, and he puts it on Regal sideways.
Yes, askew.
And this was like... What would this be like?
It was like he placed... Regal reacted as if he had been placed vomit upon his head.
Well, no, it would be sort of like if you put the cape on Superman or something like that.
Oh, I see, yes.
This caused William Regal to suddenly begin dancing.
Yes, he received the magic hat of rhythm.
I have never seen a greater man than William Regal.
He's fantastic.
He danced with such joy.
Yes.
He was the happiest man alive.
For those of you who have read his book, it's a fine book, by the way, but he was a huge fan growing up of the British comedians and physical comedy. He loves comedy, and by God has he learned his stuff.
He danced. I just picture like an elf.
Yes, and he had an impish grin on his face.
Like a little elf dancing in the trees. That's what he was doing.
Pretty much.
He danced with such joy around this circle. And, of course, finally, he was still dancing, and he stopped, and it was quiet in the room, and he was alone, except for Farouk, who said, damn. As I noted earlier on this show, I'm a frugal man. I do not like to spend money. If the buffet had not been so good, I would have been outraged to have spent $17. If I would have paid $39.95 of my own money for this pay-per-view, as Christ is my witness, it was worth it for this scene.
This was great. This was the best skit. Quite literally, this may have been the best skit ever. This is a skit. If we're still doing this show in 15 years...
I will not forget it.
No. A funny skit will happen and we'll say, this is good. However, it is not as good at the time as William Regal Danced with Crime Time.
This is up there with musical chairs with Ric Flair.
Yes.
These are all-time great skits. This was so fucking great. If anybody from WWE is listening right now, I just want to say this was great.
Yes, thank God for all of you.
Yes.
You have all earned your money. You've all earned your jobs. You are awesome.
This was true, great comedy.
Yes, this cannot...
Fine job.
This could not have been any better. It could not have been written any better. It could not have been performed any better, even down to the very last detail.
Hold on a second. Let me stop you. I don't want to get too excited about this praising WWE. Brian Gewirtz is the main writer of Raw, and he's done some great stuff. And he's also done some really bad stuff. His comedy is very, very hit and miss. And I think it should be noted that the stuff that really works is stuff for guys like Rock, who can make anything work, and can make good stuff great, and can even make bad stuff good. William Regal made this segment.
Okay.
If this had been anybody else, it probably would not have been. In fact, it would not have been even close to as funny.
This would not have worked with, for example, Joey Styles.
Because let me explain why this worked so great. When everybody's dancing around and Vince is there and Regal's there, and they both look so angry and disgusted, I thought, Regal's going to dance. And I started getting excited. Like, this is where this has to go. Regal has to join in. And he joined in, and he so exceeded my expectations. Like, if I would have written this in my own head, it would not have been this great. Because I could not have imagined Regal being as great as William Regal was.
Yes.
So, William Regal, if you're listening to this right now, you're a great man.
You're the best dude ever.
You are a fantastic, fantastic man. And you do British comedy proud.
You do. You're a fine man. I actually, and this is silly in hindsight, but I actually thought Vince was going to dance.
Nah, wouldn't have worked.
It would not. It would have been. It would have been
because you needed Vince outrage.
Yes,
and Regal's happiness.
Having Vince dance would have been B minus comedy. This was A plus comedy. Even under the very last shot where Farouk says "damn," and then the camera stays on them for what can only be described as an uncomfortable amount of time. Which
in this case was great.
Yeah,
because Regal had to continue looking like only William Regal can look.
He had a shamed William Regal look, and Farouk looked at him disapprovingly, and they just stood there for 6 seconds, and it was fantastic. So anyway, thank God for all of you.
Awesome. Then we had a skit with Mae Young kissing Vince. All I know is Craig's beautiful wife made cookies, and I went in the kitchen and ate one pretty much as it was in the oven, and I burned my mouth, but I didn't give a shit. It was a cookie. Yes, we ate cookies after the buffet, I might add. So I return, and all I see on the screen is Vince on his back on a leather couch with Mae Young on top of him, French kissing him. I don't know how it was set up. I didn't need to see it, but eventually they dragged her off, and it was quite a battle to get her off Vince McMahon. A very comical battle, in fact. Especially watching Vince have to not let her get away by grabbing her and pulling her into his mouth. So anyway, she's finally pulled off, and everyone's dragged away, and it's Coach and Vince alone, and Coach says, "You want a tic-tac?" Vince was spitting and nearly vomiting, and he said yes, and he was about to get it, and then he licked his lips and ran his tongue around the inside of his mouth and said, "You know, it might sound kinky, but I kind of liked it." And Coach said, "That's disgusting." And Vince said, "I guess you've never heard the expression, old chicken makes good soup." And that was the end.
And then I believe it ended, yes. The part you missed was when Mae Young came in.
Old chicken makes good soup. I have never heard that before.
Nor do I intend to put it to the test. I don't intend to make soup with old chicken, but...
You have?
Well, not like this. Not that old. But they brought me in. I think Vince thought he was going to meet his son, and they announced, no, this is not his son. This is not the mother of your son. But she wants you to impregnate her. And Mae declared that she wanted to bear Vince's children and then attacked him. And that's where you walked in. So this is not as good as the prior skit.
Old chicken makes good soup.
Are you searching for this now?
I'm searching for this.
To see if they didn't just make it up?
I think they made it up.
That may actually make it better.
I don't know. I guess it's on the PlayStation message board.
They're probably talking about this show.
An old chicken makes good soup, Yolanda responds. The Mexican maxims have to be explained. I guess it is a...
Ask your dad. Maybe he knows.
Oh, apparently it's a Mexican. Galina vieja hace buen caldo. Old chicken makes good soup. Huh. How about that? Never knew that one before.
Do you intend to use it often?
No, never. Hey, baby.
You may be more...
Old chicken makes good soup.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on.
Yeah.
Old chicken. Old chicken makes... Old chicken. Makes... And I thought, $30 Jesus Christ. So I was like, okay, we need this music. So they take you to this room. Old chicken makes good soup. It's very perverse, but she was old. Like, it's your first time, huh? Let me show you how to do it. And I said... This is a reason that you should get a Mystic Tan. Old chicken makes good soup. She's like wearing a... she's got this cleavage-exposing top as well. Old chicken. You know what it makes, Vince?
What's that, Brian?
Good soup.
Good soup.
Oh, chicken. Chicken.
What are you doing?
I'm just fucking around. The Kennedy-Vince illegitimate child deal continues as Vince ran into him, noted that his middle name also was Kennedy. Kennedy's like, yeah, I know. Paul Heyman told me. So Vince said, good luck to you. And he walked away, and Vince goes, not a bad kid. Walks a little funny. And then, of course, off he walked in a funny manner. Walking funny is genetic, apparently.
Sure. the funny walk gene.
Not in any way subtle, which was just fine with me. Carlito hosted his cabana with Vince, wished him happy birthday, which was, I believe, Friday. Vince said, it was a big day for me. I turned 50. So he revealed that he was going to sue this woman if she did not reveal the child within 2 weeks. So anyway, out came Hunter, and we had what I guess was this week's version of Raw Idol, and it sucked. Hunter said he was going to bring out 4 girls that Vince had slept with. There was a fat one, there was one with an eye patch, there was one that was a guy. The segment just was dying.
And it went forever.
And finally, Vince sent them all away and walked off and said he hated Hunter. And then Carlito and Hunter had a stare down, and Carlito bit into his apple, looked at Hunter, and spit it right in his face. This was quite a little scene. And Hunter's reaction was actually great. He just stood there for a little while, like, you spit apple in my face. I don't believe this. And then he smiled, and then he beat the shit out of Carlito and laid him out with a cabana, and that was the end of that. That was pretty much the only good thing about this segment.
Cabana, a wrestling move also known as a pedigree in some circles, but that's what he hit him with.
What'd I call it?
You called it a cabana.
He hit him with a cabana?
He hit him with Colt Cabana, perhaps.
Well.
Regardless, yes. This would only have worked if Carlito had spit the apple with fury, because he took a bite, and I thought he was going to back down and walk away, and I was thinking, Jesus Christ, this is going to be lame. But no, he reared back, and he spat the apple with all his might into Hunter's face. Hunter took it like a man, smiled, and killed him, and at least that was a good end of the segment. But yes, this dragged. This went forever.
It sucked.
The only good part was as Vince was leaving, he turned back one last time and growled to Hunter, I hate you. And Hunter made the darn sign with his arm.
He snapped his fingers in front of him like, shit.
Yes, he was bummed that Vince
well.
hated him.
Anyway, then we had another coach and Vince meeting. And Vince said he had a feeling he was going to have to wait 2 weeks to find out who his child was, and in walked Regal with news. He said, next week. What the hell was that?
I kicked the mic stand. That was my fault, everyone. That was bad radio, courtesy of Vincent Verhey.
Vince said next week all the family was going to be there, and they were bringing their attorneys. And then both guys gave Coach the evil eye. I don't know why, but they did.
I was jotting down McMahon's attorneys, and I missed the end of this. I looked up, and suddenly Regal was just staring at Coach, and I giggled.
Yeah, I don't know if Coach... I don't know. I guess we'll find out. Then we had Vince meeting with Coach and his legal team, and Carlito showed up with a new haircut. And I've said many horrible things about Carlito back in the day, but he looked so much better with his haircut, I can't even begin to fathom it.
Okay.
I thought it was a gigantic improvement.
He was kind of... I don't know. He decided to cut his hair, but he couldn't cut it too short or he totally kills the gimmick. So he's got this weird...
What's his gimmick?
And he has weird hair.
Well, since when that's his gimmick? His gimmick
since
seems
day one.
Cool.
Since day one. The gimmick has been he's a Caribbean guy with a wacky hair. Do you think he should have gotten a buzz cut?
No, but I mean, since when have they ever mentioned his hair? Have they ever once said, boy, look at my big hair?
Okay, no, but they don't have to mention it. You can look at that guy, and anyone who ever saw Carlito would say, look at his hair.
Well,
they wouldn't need the announcers to put him over.
Same with Jeff Hardy, and you just cut it off. Doesn't matter.
Point being, I don't think Carlito could have gotten a buzz cut and pulled it off. So he had to get this kind of weird mini half afro, half pompadour thing. I don't know how else to describe it.
I think he should have just shaved it. Who cares? So then we had, what did he want? They ended up, it was supposed to be Triple H and Carlito and Vince added Umaga. Yeehaw. So anyway, then we had Vince and the lawyers having a meeting. This was great. Vince was making sure all of his money was safe. And all of a sudden he turns to Coach and he said, how's Regal? And Coach said, he's pretty bad. So Vince paused for just a moment and then said, well, that's too bad. So anyway, Coach, you're going to have to step up now. And now Coach apparently is in this situation where he's the new GM.
You've often said...
I can't do justice.
You've often recapped something and said, I cannot do this justice. This has never been more true.
No.
It's not your fault.
It's impossible.
It was too great to capture the fantastic performance of Vincent Kennedy McMahon in this one line.
Because he didn't care.
So awesome.
So then we had one of the lawyers suggesting that Vince... hear what the family had to say, and then maybe they could do a settlement. And so Vince fired this man.
Vince did not want a defensive strategy.
No, he wanted to go on the offensive. He's all about going for the jugular. Vince is so insane, and that's why I love him.
Speaking of sad,
this show's gonna suck. Then we had Talking. Talking was the main event. Speaking of Impact, Vince, Coach, and the lawyers came out, and... then Linda came out and said she didn't want his money, but if he had actually been fucking all these women, she would sue him for everything that he got or he had or whatever. Steph came out and said... wait, no, she came out and Vince had a video. This was so boring. So Vince had a video that was supposedly of him being her dad from... kindergarten on or some bullshit. Instead, it was him beating up her and Linda, including the aforementioned crippler crossface variation with a pipe. That was a good one. And so anyway, he yelled at Coach for being responsible, and of course Hunter appeared on the big screen and said he had done it. And the key to this whole segment, the only thing that made sense to me was when he smiled and said, "Hey, Steph," and she smiled back, and that's all he did with it.
Yeah.
That's all they did with it.
That was, in fact, awesome.
Shane and called Vince a lunatic and said he should change. And Vince was getting on his knees and saying he was going to change. And then out came Kennedy. And he said, I'm your son. I'm cutting to the chase here because the whole execution...
It sucked and we want to get through it.
The execution was lacking.
I suspect they wanted Kennedy to announce that he was Vince's son. I think they expected the fans to care more than they did.
No one gave a shit.
No one gave a shit.
So, anyway, he said he was the son, blah, 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 and this, that, and the other thing. And then finally a strange man came out and said, I represent the strange woman who gave birth to your bastard. He said the DNA had confirmed that the son was a WWE superstar, but it was not Mr. Kennedy. And so Vince said, if it wasn't Mr. Kennedy, who was it? And the dude said there was a clue.
Yes. He had a clue.
Let's explain. Vince had sex with a woman. She had an illegitimate child. The child is in WWE. She has filed a paternity suit. She is not telling him who she is or who the son is, but she is giving clues.
Sure. Maybe if Vince figures out who his son is, he'll get a Scooby snack.
The clue is things are looking up.
He announced this clue, and everyone in the ring looked at each other confused, and all the fans looked at each other confused, and then the show ended.
So next week we'll find out who the son is. Things are looking up.
This show sucked.
What could this clue mean? Is the Great Khali his son?
It must be.
Is Hornswoggle, who is perpetually looking up? Who is Vince's son? Hornswoggle is Irish.
Oh, there you go. Perhaps they'll introduce a new character. Sean Spears will now be Sean Up.
Things are looking up. Wow.
This was a failure.
I would cry with laughter if Kennedy had fucked his way out of being the son.
When I first read the spoilers, that's what it sounded like. It was not that clear watching this. He was still trying to step in front of Shane. He was still insisting, no, I'm the son.
I think it was very clear. The bottom line is it probably will still be Kennedy. I don't know. Maybe we'll find out tomorrow. But regardless, it's pretty clear that Vince and the son are going to form a union, and Hunter and Steph and Shane and Linda are going to represent McMahon family values.
Who could possibly care?
Vince and the insane son are going to go on a rampage and attempt to take over the galaxy. And I can't wait.
I guess you can care.
I can wait, actually.
Okay.
It sounded great when it was explained to me, the original idea, and as it's starting to be executed, boy, is it not working.
Well, there's some things that are, to a degree, out of their hands that have happened that have kind of put a wrench in the whole deal.
Like Kennedy's not suspended, what has happened?
Well,
nothing. And if he is suspended, what was the point of him coming out this week and never coming back?
I don't know.
I don't think he's suspended. I don't know. I don't know how he couldn't be suspended. That seems impossible. Unless he's already had one suspension, and he's like Orton and got off the hook. I guess we'll find out, but things are looking up.
Things are looking up. Yeah.
Things are looking up, everybody. What a clue. What a clue. What are the clues like in Clue? Like the candlestick is in the something or other? Was there a clue that said things are looking up?
God, I haven't played Clue in so long. I think you would find a weapon, and if you found it, that meant it was not the murder weapon.
No one cared about Kennedy as the son. That's sad for him.
They probably said, I wish I was home playing Clue right now instead of watching this show.
That'll teach him. Kids, sign up for the website. But there was plenty of stuff to talk about on Raw. It is clear Ken Kennedy has, in fact, been suspended
for being an idiot.
For purchasing steroids as of February. What a dipshit.
Which I could have sworn he said he did not do.
He did.
Oh.
He said he did not take steroids. And then once he was pressed on the issue, when everybody knew that he had, in fact, taken steroids, he admitted he had taken steroids, but the wellness policy weaned him. He was no longer on steroids after the wellness policy came out, except for all of his shipments that he got until this past February, when apparently his signature got busted. So, anyway, he's out of action, and a lot of guys out of action. We'll have more on that in the newsletter this week, including why Booker T quit. That's right, Booker T has quit the company.
Oh, dear.
It's very distressing, but shit happens.
What can you do?
We'll talk about that this coming weekend, but... Well, speaking of bodies, there were many smaller ones on this show, and fatter ones. Santino Marella is very well.
He is so well.
We'll talk about the show. Vince came down to the ring and said 5 weeks ago, actually wrote 5 years ago, many weeks ago, he was embarrassed to discover that he had a bastard child. And then the week after, he discovered this person was a WWE superstar. And he said that instead of this woman, the mother of this child being a professional, she had given stupid clues, such as things are looking up. He said they were in Green Bay, and so everybody was probably expecting Mr. Kennedy, but he said Mr. Kennedy was not here. He had been suspended for impersonating a McMahon. There was a WWE magazine with him on the cover that he commanded Coach rip up. Coach failed in a great highlight of the show.
Finally muttered, just rip up the cover.
So, anyway, then the Great Khali's music hit, and he came out, and Vince was overjoyed. A bastard with a giant penis. What more could Vince McMahon want? So, he did a promo that culminated with the words, Great McMahon!
Yes.
And his translator explained that Khali had insight. Think about this.
This show, many parts of the show are awesome.
I just like the idea that the Great Khali would have insight about anything in this world, aside from what it's like to be a giant. But his insight were that things were looking up, and that could only apply to him, the Great McMahon. So, his translator said that, actually I don't know what he said.
The translator repeated what he said.
The jungles of Punjab, which I could have sworn that Punjab was a desert, but perhaps Khali was in the arid portion of the desert. Out came JBL, who said he loved money like Vince, so he should be the son. Poor argument.
I just love that these men were campaigning to be the son as if, they could retroactively switch their DNA. That's not how being the son works.
Retroactively switch the DNA? What are you talking about?
JBL either is or is not Vince McMahon's son. No matter how much he sucks up to Vince, it won't change that fact.
I see. So then Mr. Johnson appeared on the screen, and he said the child would be revealed later tonight, just not right now. He said we had to wait until the client was good and ready, and Vince demanded to know who the son was immediately, whether he was in the ring, and the man, Jeff Hardy'd also come out. And he didn't want to be the son, so I don't know why he came out.
Well, he came out for the yeah.
Why did he come out?
He came out so they could have the setup of... He came out to say, and by the way, when they asked what he was doing there, he replied, I don't really know. But he was out there, to celebrate when he was not Vince's son.
He'd gotten text messages from people saying that when he came off ladders, it made people look up.
Yes.
So perhaps he was his son, but he hoped not. So anyway, Mr. Johnson said the child was not Jeff Hardy. So Jeff said, praise the Lord! And Vince responded, what a fool.
This was so great.
He said if Jeff was not his son, he didn't give a shit about him, so he sent him to a match with Great Khali.
Jeff was woebegone.
And he should have. He probably tried to go over the match before this show started and realized what a disaster it would be.
I should say also, when you say that Jeff Hardy said praise the Lord and Vince said what a fool, you are not exaggerating. These are direct quotes from this particular skit on this episode of Monday Night Raw.
Yes.
Jeff Hardy actually shouted, praise the Lord! And Vince said, what a fool. And his other great line, when Johnson appeared on the screen and Vince said, for the record, what did he say? For the record, I hate you. And he went on a rant about how he hates all attorneys. He even hated his own. He hates his own attorneys. This is a fine segment. I want to turn out to be a show with not a lot of good wrestling, but a lot of very good stuff.
He has to hate his own attorney by now.
I guarantee he does.
Really think about it. So then we had Coach meeting with Vince, and Coach announced that he had banned Cena from the building, which they'd announced earlier, but apparently Vince knew nothing about it. And Coach said, listen, WWE.com is doing a poll to determine who your son might be. He said he had the number 2 point getter out in the hall. So he brought in Stevie Richards. And Vince burst into hysterics, laughing and cackling as loud as possible, which we need a drop of, by the way. And he booted Stevie out, told his mom to keep voting, and responded, that's ridiculous.
And the best part of this was Stevie just left.
Yeah.
He didn't protest or beg anything at all. He just left, presumably to tell his mom to keep voting.
He wanted to know who number 1 was, and so Coach told Vince it was Triple H.
No one was happy about that.
So anyway, Vince came out and called all the wrestlers to the brands. Everybody was there.
Everyone
Festus,
on Earth was around the ring.
Highlanders, Deuce, Shade, the DNA testing.
Even Randy Orton was out there. We know his dad.
Apparently not. Mr. Johnson appeared on the screen. That's the attorney for the woman or whatever. And he said he was going to start with a list of men who were not the son. Hell of an attorney this guy is. Hell of a case. He said the son was not extreme. All the ECW guys bailed.
Vince sent them packing with a note saying he was happy Balls was not his son. He also stopped to wave and say, "Hi, Tommy."
Yes.
He waved to Tommy Dreamer and said hi. I don't know why, but it made me laugh.
Mr. Johnson said his son had a fondness for gold. So Vince released everyone who was not a current or former champion. I didn't look, but I'm sure this was bullshit. Everyone should have stayed in the ring.
As far as who is the former champion?
Seriously, who is not a former champion in WWE?
Cody Rhodes, because he's been there like 3 weeks. That's probably it. I don't know who else left. The Daltons, I'm sure, they just got there.
A lot of people left is the point.
Yes.
Way too many than could possibly have all been...
Could all not have been champions of something somewhere.
So then they said your son's skin is fair, so all black fellows and anyone who was not a Caucasian was sent to the back, including Mark Henry. So then the clue was your son's skin is fair, as is his hair. Dr. Seuss, perhaps is the mother or the father. I don't know how it would work. But they eliminated a bunch of dark-haired fellows, and everyone was chanting Kennedy. And Vince reminded everybody he had been suspended for impersonating a McMahon. So, then the next clue was individual. So, Cade and Murdoch were eliminated. Just think about that. He was suspended for impersonating a McMahon. And think of why he was really suspended. It's such a great line.
I see.
For so many reasons.
I understand now.
Anyway... So we were down to JBL Hunter and the Sandman.
Oh, yes. I was so giddy at this point.
And Vince said, and I quote, "All I have to say is that 2 out of the 3 here would be disastrous to me." So Mr. Johnson said the son loved to play the game. That's when we had a very awkward moment. And then Mr. Johnson added he liked to play hide-and-seek and, as we saw on Smackdown, marbles. And out came Hornswoggle, who had a very happy celebration as Hunter cackled and cackled away. And, indeed, that's the son.
Yes.
The midget.
Hornswoggle McMahon.
Hornswoggle K. McMahon.
I love the idea, I guess it turned out not to be true, but the idea throughout this was that the mother was not only hiding the child's identity from Vince, but also from the child. We were supposed to believe that these men did not know their own paternity.
This whole thing is absurd.
It is. I'm thinking too much. It's true.
I don't know if anybody noticed or not, but
it was fun.
Completely ridiculous.
Pretty much every non-wrestling segment on the show was fun. I guess the wrestling segments were fine. Then the most fun one was the disaster. Actually, there are 2 train wrecks on the show, now that I think about it. But they were fun.
Hornswoggle. Next, they have to determine who's the mom. Because we don't know that. It could be Mae Young.
And she just forgot?
It could be Linda.
Why not?
We don't know for sure. Think of all the possibilities of who could be Hornswoggle's. I don't think they say his age, but he's young. He's like 20 or something like that. So it could be any of a number of women.
The closest they came is they did mention he's the youngest cruiserweight champion of all time.
Hornswoggle. Who could be his mom? It's got to be Mae Young. It's got to be Nancy Grace.
Yes, now we're talking.
I figured it out. Nancy Grace is the mother. Hornswoggle's a child, and Vince McMahon's going to lose his mind. Now you know where this is going, everybody.
It's all settled.
All right, let's play a song here, and then we'll get into some shout-outs.